Okay.
All right. So welcome to the Ian Computers monthly webinar. My name is Blake. I'm the content manager for Ian Computers, joined by Ian MacRae, president and CEO with 20 years of experience helping businesses manage and control their IT costs. One of the biggest questions he gets is, how much is this going to cost me? And so that is the topic of our webinar today. Not just the number, but what are the hidden costs? What are the unknowns of supporting IT, and how can those be kept under control for a small business? So, Ian?
Well, thank you, Blake, for that introduction, and I'm so excited to be working together with you. We started out together back in the old days of Ian Computers having a retail shop, which I started in 1997, and you were there helping us, sell computers and fix computers at the shop.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a really neat evolution to see, to reconnect after seeing you go to corporate IT and come full circle here working together on this. So like Blake said, I founded Ian Computers, and we've really gone through an evolution of humble roots, starting in Stanton, Virginia, and doing a retail shop, to then growing to a break-fix service provider regionally in Central Virginia, moving on to retainer plans for businesses, and now we work throughout Virginia and Washington, D.C., Maryland, and we're a managed service provider. And managed services provider is fancy talk for we want to be proactive and provide IT strategy. And we've been recognized for the past 5 years as one of the top providers really in the world through the MSP 501 survey. There I am at the last event when we could actually get together in events pre-COVID. I think that was October or something like that of last year.
There's no social distancing happening here, I notice.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's a virtual meeting this year. But, throughout this whole experience, IT costs, kind of the big thing. I mean, do you remember shopping for a computer when you were first getting started on IT?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know. How much did RAM cost when you were first buying it? Do you remember?
Well, I remember it dropping off sharply, and I was being so excited that I could buy 2 gigs of RAM for under $400 or $500.
Yeah. So I mean, computers, they tend to be a big ticket item that does get shopped, and cost is really important whenever you have a big ticket item. So sometimes what we see is that we're used to shopping for things like RAM, or maybe even an airline ticket, mm-hmm. and we kind of know exactly what we're getting, and we're just looking to get the best value or the lowest cost for that thing, and the specifications are there, and you think you know exactly what you're getting. Does it feel like that when you're shopping for a commodity?
Oh yeah, you go to Amazon, you click sort by lowest price, and just click the first, or maybe not the first one, but the second or third one down, and you feel like you're getting a good deal on.
Yeah, I got to shopping like that for computer parts when I was starting out, and really sometimes when we do that, you kind of lose track of the outcome that you want. Mm-hmm. I remember having a really hard lesson like that. We were building computers, back at the retail shop, and I didn't know where the computers were going to be used, and I bought the I worked with the client. We went through all the price lists, and they, selected the cheapest parts, and then they put the cheapest parts into desks that didn't have any sort of breathing, and the computers actually caught on fire because they were just getting so hot in these desks that were all closed up. So whether it's something fairly simple like that, where you get what you pay for with a part, or something a little more complicated like a business productivity app or IT consulting, it's pretty important to know the outcome you're looking for. I think of IT as kind of like the lever of today's business. It has such a outsized impact on everything else that happens in a business.
Yeah, for sure.
You've worked with some pretty large organizations, Blake. How did you see IT really impact their costs or their ability to drive revenue or other things?
Yeah, I mean, it's a major factor now. I mean, in the last 10 years, it went from a footnote to a massive driver of not only the budget but also the goals of the organization. Those things totally changed just in the in the few years that I've been around. I noticed.
Yes. Really, I feel like I guess there's certain services that we think of as commodities that we don't really think of as going to maybe have a big impact on the way the business operates. I think of maybe telephone service like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about the same, or it seems like that. It kind of just comes down to price. It has to work, but it just, people have been using this service the same way for a long time. You're not really changing how people are looking to use the service. It just pretty much comes down to price. But I think if IT, including even telephone, is brought to bear in the right way, it's really going to be having a big impact on other costs in the businesses, like labor costs, the cost of materials that go into making the end user, the end product. Like here in a restaurant example, the food costs. So if I was operating a chain of pizza restaurants, and I was trying to impact the labor cost, maybe it would be more efficient to have all of the orders answered centrally. We see that with some of the apps that are going onto our phones.
Mm-hmm.
I doubt that each Domino's location is running their own, you have somebody sitting there at an email, looking for the email for the user. It's all coming in
Mm-hmm.
through a central processor. The same thing with the food costs. If the restaurant is using their IT correctly, maybe they can have some things not go bad in the kitchen because they're ordering the right amount, because their computer system is telling them, hey, we don't need to order more sausage this week. And then lastly, the marketing costs. Much of our marketing is done online. So certainly we can use technology to impact our marketing and our rent and utilities costs. So it's really the leverage for business these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And yet we still see it, kind of buried in this slice of the pie with a big question mark next to it.
Yeah. So oftentimes, we are in situations where we are, talking with an end user, or we're talking with a prospect, and it's difficult to really have a handle on how to measure the IT costs. And this is an interesting survey here that that Dell did, where only 14% of businesses, if you look down here at the bottom, work with an outside technology vendor to, kind of have a complete solution. Looks like about 65% of businesses either have an internal department or they're handling a lot of the IT themselves. So really they're bearing most of the costs of kind of putting IT together. And even if they're managing a freelancer, you usually have to project manage that freelance engagement, and you're still bearing a lot of the cost there as well. So it's usually when somebody is shopping for a service like ours at Ian Computers, it's really an apples and oranges comparison that is being made, which is difficult because we don't really know their overall costs as far as their overall labor costs or their overall material costs that go into their product, which bad IT could be impacting greatly those overall costs. So, what are the bigger areas where IT can have an impact? Most people, like you said, Blake, are seeing it in this, the direct expense category, but I think you really like to look at it, Blake, in the green chart. What are some of those things in the green area that you like to focus in on?
Security is a major one, as we're going to talk about. I think the cybersecurity field is becoming very much more complex, and people are, spending vast sums of money on tools that they may or may not know how to leverage correctly. Also, things like even personnel. I mean, we know that's one of the biggest expenses you're going to have in a business is hiring people, and so being able to know when you're hiring, who you're hiring, and that they're going to be able to do their job efficiently. Having that as a question mark is a real issue for a lot of businesses.
That's right. And the correct job role is interesting too. Have you ever seen a place where, because of lack of automation, the hiring plans become a little skewed?
Yeah, for sure. You see people that keep, they get stuff added to their plate that really should be automated as kind of, below their experience level and their pay level, but it's taking all of their time. And so it's just a huge inefficiency there.
So I find thinking about the rise of Uber and Lyft really interesting. Because taxi cab companies, they were very. My experience with riding with most taxi cab services is that they're very cost conscious. You're usually in a used police car that was probably bought at auction for a couple of $1,000s. You get a sense that the driver really has to control a lot of expenses, do a lot of the maintenance work themselves. But you would be out in front of a hotel and you'd see a line of taxi cabs there in the past, all waiting for patrons. So the labor cost was actually very high in many respects, but it wasn't being intelligently deployed. So I'm sure that the taxi cab services, in 22 years of being in IT, I never worked with a taxi cab business. I know there are a couple around here that are pretty big, but they never called up and said, "Hey, we need IT support." So obviously, Uber and Lyft really turns that on its ear. Do you know anyone who's gone to work for Uber and Lyft? Any engineers? Do you remember any of the type of people they would hire?
No, I don't know anyone personally, but
Well, I remember that they were only wanting to hire like the top of the class, like
mm,
the Harvard grade, like engineers. It was the exact opposite, approach of getting the absolute best and brightest engineering and management team to have the impact that they have had.
yeah.
And I can only imagine that they had exponentially high costs when it comes to IT, but they've just overturned an entire industry.
Yeah. I think what's interesting here is the industry they didn't set out to overturn, which was rental cars, which I'm sure, the rental car companies are spending an amount on IT more than taxi cab companies. But,
Hmm.
Hertz just went bankrupt. Like, they're the rental car industry has been turned on its head also because they weren't as strategic as Uber and Lyft were.
Right. Yeah, that's a great call there. I think you mentioned earlier the security side of things, and I guess the IT industry has really grown up in a profound period of deregulation. Growing up in the 1990s, there's no professional certificate that you have to have. There's no building inspector that comes in behind your work and says, this is quality work. So we've really left it up to the marketplace to provide those services of of inspection. The auditor is coming. They're Russian. They might hold you ransom. So if you pass the audit, you don't get held ransom. It's a fair deal.
They charge their fee in Bitcoin, I believe.
That's right. So I guess with all of this said, I mean, we've talked about some of the indirect costs of IT. The audit cost of ransomware, the costs around, like with Uber and Lyft, if you're really able to get it right and leverage it. So how do we go about and just sort of a general business environment getting IT right? Do we build it by hiring a company, or do we do we buy it by hiring a company, or do we build it by hiring a department?
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to just look at some of the costs around building an IT department. Here's the type of org chart we run into when we're talking to larger companies, that they'll usually have a leadership role around reporting and data. And that's one that's very hard to outsource. Every business is pretty unique. Like I'm sure, Uber and Lyft, they probably outsource some of their servers to somebody like AWS, but they really can't outsource the reporting side. So then you have the applications and systems, more the server type side. That's going to be your CTO. That's sort of overseeing the big technology building blocks, and the CIO is really looking to make sure the information's flowing. I really like to separate out those leadership roles because I feel like oftentimes there's people that are really into systems, but don't really care what the system is processing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that with IT people, Blake?
Oh yeah, it's I don't want to say it's rare, but yeah, it's kind of rare to see an IT person that has more of that strategic view, that big picture view, as opposed to just wanting to fix cool stuff all the time, work on cool stuff.
Yeah. Show me the heavy iron. I want to touch it. So there's a fair bit of administrative overhead that's grown up in IT. It used to be, and it's still a big part, having an asset tag on a computer, knowing what's in your IT closet, knowing when that equipment is going to be up for renewal, what the life cycle of it is. Does it need to be replaced every 5 years? That is a role that's pretty critical, but as those types of things have gone virtual, boy, that's become a lot harder to manage. Have you been snagged in your career by virtual things? It's kind of like the title to your car, and it's out there in the cloud somewhere, and it's tied to a Gmail account from a former employee, and you're trying to get into it. Has that ever come up for you?
Oh yeah, when you run into shadow IT stuff, people setting up cloud services that do this and that are already replicated by internal services, but they want to do it this way. And then when somebody leaves or gets a job change or something, it's gone. No idea where it went.
Right. You have the SSL certificates and all of these things where if you lose track of them, boy, you can really have an interruption to business and a lot of time down the drain. So then we have the information management department. This is making sure we have all the forms right in our business. We're collecting the right data. We're training the users. We're getting some custom applications developed, or we're customizing sort of off-the-shelf things to meet our needs. That's a big one. And for most businesses, even if you buy into an industry standard system, they're probably not going to have all the boxes, the forms that you need. Getting that set up correctly is a big deal. Then we have infrastructure engineering. That's really keeping the equipment running, making sure the right people have access to the equipment. You have your users all in the system. Who's in the system. The system is online. Then you have the risk and compliance. Somebody looking after security, disaster recovery, making sure that if you have a compliance regime, getting aligned to that compliance regime, like PCI compliance, HIPAA. Operation support. Now, this is the one, it's only 2 boxes here, but most IT departments that I run into, that's actually the majority of their staff. It's help desk. You've worked in some bigger IT departments, Blake. How big was your help desk?
The team I just came from, so we're supporting about a 5,000 person organization with about the equivalent of 40 full-time people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then all the other things on this chart, how many other, the other assigned IT, how big was the overall? You had 40 people in help desk. How much was the rest?
We did have a large custom line of business application that was a lot of people, but just for infrastructure engineering, it was probably around 100 people total. So,
okay.
So help desk was a pretty big fraction of that.
Right. I think so often, especially as a organization is smaller, oftentimes you'll have 1 or 2 people in IT, and really all you have is operation support. And all the other things up here are kind of the other duties as assigned, and that becomes a real problem. Oftentimes it really manifests itself with the last one here, the IT projects. You can probably skip out on doing just about every other box here. And users might not know, as long as the IT person is friendly and answering the phone. The risk and compliance could not be happening. The infrastructure engineering could just about not be happening. Certainly the user training and the information management, the admin stuff cannot be happening. But usually users will know if their projects are behind track. hey, we asked you guys to do the wireless access points, and we're still waiting 2 years, and it's not done yet. Those last two are probably the most visible ones for users. But these are all the different roles that we see in an IT department. So I was trying to think about, how to put together a budget. This is about cost after all. So now we know what roles are out there. If we are doing things right, I guess it's really, I run an accounting department as well, and I've had an accounting department of one person, and usually that's almost more costly for me, or is more costly for me than having two people in that department or three people in that department, depending on the size of the business. Because usually I can't get one person that gives me strategy, that gives me paying all the bills on time, and gives me collections. I mean, those are all really different roles. But so I really see the same problem in an IT department, is that you want somebody giving you strategy, you want somebody that's doing the that's sort of the nuts and bolts stuff proactively, kind of paying the bills on time. That's your infrastructure engineering. And you want somebody that has that customer service mindset, that's really able to talk to people, get results with people. And it's very difficult to find somebody that can do all three of those roles. Sometimes you can get two of them in one person. You can probably tell I'm a talker, so maybe I could do the CTO role, and I could talk to people, but I'm probably not going to be the best engineer, So it's really tough. So, as you scale up, the salaries go up, and the nice thing is, the more people you have in here, the more people you have really dedicated to a role and getting good at doing that role, and not having those single points of failure. So even though the costs go way up, I want to show you later on how that all comes together if you're managing larger systems. So the other thing that's often overlooked is just because you have people doesn't mean that you have process. So what did you have to do at your enterprise IT job, Blake, to really get the process down pat with IT?
We had to put a lot of effort into rebuilding our process, because we had scaled over a number of years without really adjusting our process. We were still a very small, we were supporting maybe 1,000, 1,500 users, and gradually it grew to where we were supporting more and more, many thousand users, but our processes were still focused on that small amount of users. And so we had to lock myself, our help desk manager, our department director in a room, and we said, okay, we're going to rebuild this process from the ground up. And it took many, many weeks and many months of going back and forth and creating documentation, and it was a long process to rebuild that process to where it was ready to support the number of users we had grown to.
I see. And oftentimes, I guess in my experience, it's really difficult to know what good process is, and a lot of times, because you just know what you know. And I guess especially when it comes to security, a lot of times, there's something that works maybe really well for the help desk, has a really bad security implication, or something that's great for security, really screws up your users in the help desk. So you're really caught in a situation where you can kind of torture people with not having your process right. Has it ever felt like that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we were getting some pretty bad reviews on our help desk before we overhauled the process. So from internal too. Like these are our friends saying, like you guys need to step this up. So, but yeah, once the process was in place, people were a lot happier with the service we were providing. But it was a process to build the process.
And there's so many new tools coming online, like you mentioned the security tools, and they're creating a lot of additional noise or tickets or things to work, and it's really challenging. So we see needs for external consulting really around the help desk process and the system administration projects, and security is certainly one of those driving factors on both of those, but also just general issues like issue escalation or documentation. A lot of times so what I'm trying to say here is, you hire the right people. They're joining your organization without any sort of process. So where is the process going to come from? Well, it's probably going to come from their last employer, which may not be really a best fit. They might even be leaving that last job because because things were not working well there. So the next thing in staffing an IT department, building an IT department, you're going to hire the people, you're going to get them the consulting that they need, and then you're going to get them the tools that they need. So we see if let's say you're supporting 100 computers, that would be 100 endpoints, and you might be spending between $15 and $35 per endpoint, depending on the needs of the business. Like a defense contractor is probably going to spend more, like $35 per endpoint, where maybe a less regulated business would spend more like the 15 on the tools side of things. So, has it ever felt like to you the IT department is the last department to automate?
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Every other, like on the manufacturing floor or in the accounting department, it's like, we're going to automate this. We do not want to, deal with collections anymore, or we do not want to put these labels on every box that goes out the door. We're going to do some automation, but in IT, usually that IT personality kind of likes touching the equipment, like, I don't trust the automation. I want to do it myself.
Yeah, we just started doing more and more with that in the last few years. But yeah, it was a culture shift that we had to go through. It was a here's how we used to do it, and here's how we're going. Like, we had to make that jump, and it was there's some growing pains.
Yeah, the engineer that wants to log in every day and sort of tweak it manually. Have you ever encountered that?
Oh yeah, I knew a guy that he left a few years ago, our organization, and we were afraid that like there were things that were just going to stop working because he had just this collection of batch files that were doing all manner of who knows what, and like as part of him moving jobs, it was like we had to make sure all that stuff was still going to work when his account lost the rights that it had. So yeah, it was, yes, I've seen that before.
Yeah. So, having the right tools really means that instead of paying, Bobby to log in and run his batch files every week, that there's something there that really works predictably. So what's really interesting here is, getting IT right when you're small is just really painfully costly. We see here for a 50 organization, even if you're not putting, filling out that big org chart, you're doing some role sharing. You've got 3 people. They're wearing a lot of different hats. But you're getting them some consulting support. You're getting them the right tools. You're looking at $482 per endpoint or per user to do that type of support, where if you're a larger organization, you've got a huge advantage. You look at your costs, even as you go up here and you have more people in dedicated roles, you have a fully staffed IT department, your costs are going way down to 151. And by the way, in this larger organization, you're probably a lot happier people. I mean, what would you say were one of the reasons that people left an IT department that you've worked on, that you've seen over the years, Blake?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to one of the phrases I've heard again and again is it's not fun anymore. It's
Yeah.
what used to be, like you said, get in there and do stuff. When that stops working and you don't have anything to replace that, you're not getting into the automation, you're not getting into the the more advanced tools. It's like, yeah, this is just a lot of hard work and not a lot of payoff.
Yeah. I guess in Daniel Pink's book about what motivates people, I guess the intrinsic motivation of learning and discovery and those types of things. I guess we all want to be an expert in something, and that passion of learning a system and becoming an expert and really getting to the next level. And what I see happens is when we've been a smaller company, we just weren't able to foster that. People were just sort of thrown from one hat to the next. They were wearing so many different hats, they never really felt like they were able to be an expert.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're at this 50-person organization, you're going to probably have a lot more turnover in your IT team than when you're at the 800-person organization and you have a little bit of a career path, and you have that opportunity to specialize. I've really seen that over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're not looking at much of a difference in salary here, like, as far as percentage between a 250 and 800 person organization. It's kind of, you may have added a few more help desk people, but you still need the same number of executives, you need the same number of managers. You're not getting that economy of scale until you're at a certain level, right?
Yeah. And that's been part of our growth at Ian Computers. We're now supporting about 2,200 endpoints users, and it's been certainly a challenge over the years to make that scale happen.
Mm-hmm.
So what usually happens is kind of what happened here at Fazio Mechanical Services. You get one IT director. I did a little research here. He's been on the job, it looks like, for 20 years, at least as of a couple of months back when I did the research. Here you have a 100-employee organization, 25 million in revenue. This is all out there on the web. Mm-hmm. And Tom here is the IT director, and he's having to wear all of these different hats, and probably has to be a jack of all trades, master of none. We saw all those different things going into the IT department, and it could just be a huge load to keep on top of projects and help desk, just those two things. Mm-hmm. So Fazio has customers, and they worked with some big customers, and Target was one of their customers, and Fazio was doing basically they were doing coolers. You go to a Target and they have the little grocery section, and they've got the coolers where the produce, the freezer stuff is, mm-hmm. and they were doing those freezer systems, and they were putting them on networks to make sure that the temperature didn't drop and all the groceries would go bad.
Sure.
Makes a lot of sense, but they were the ones that were actually breached. That then allowed hackers to come in, and the coolers were on the same system as the point of sale where the credit card transactions were taking place, and then ultimately the hackers walked out with millions of dollars worth of credit card information in one of the biggest breaches in the world.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the way we look at some of these IT costs and what we ask of people in IT, just asking too much of them,
mm-hmm.
Really sets us up for these types of things.
Yeah.
Now, with ASIO, I think it's pretty clear you had one person, you know, trying to do everything. Monticello is a little different. We were talking with them here locally, and they're pretty well funded. They've got 300 employees. It's funny that the target, the people that brought down Target were actually much smaller, but you know, Monticello, 300 employees, you know, big endowment of $260 million. They had the right, you know, the right budget there, but really what happened with Monticello is, you know, they hired a new IT director. You know, he didn't have direct experience. You know, he was a lifelong IT professional, but didn't have direct experience with running an IT department. So they really, I think that they were hiring, they were getting the right staff, but they really were missing the tools and the process. You know, getting the department staffed up, it takes some time to get your you know, you got to let you buy it. I know for myself that I always go out and I buy the tool and the vendor says, it's going to make you secure. Look at all the wonderful features. And then you buy it and you realize, oh, I'm going to have to work on this tool for 2 years with a consultant to actually take advantage of all these features. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh yeah, this is gonna solve all your problems, and it's gonna bring about world peace and, you know, peace between cats and dogs and whatever. Like, and then we start digging into it, and it's like, yeah, it will do that if you set it up correctly and you have the people around it and you have the time to look at the results and you have time to, you know, take action on the result. You know, yes, it's a pretty common thing.
Yeah. So I think here, you know, Monticello wasn't asking too much of their employees in terms of like the job roles, but you know, they were a big enough target where they just didn't have their processes right, and they too got breached. You know, that external audit that hits the news, and then ended up having to really spend a ton of money because they are a nonprofit. It's all public information. They spent $288,000 in reactive IT services. They had you know, had to walk 300 computers out the door because they were all ransomed and encrypted. So just a huge cost, and one that insurance did not really pick up and pay for.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when you see the cost of building a department and having to juggle, you know, the staffing as well as the tools and the process, you might say, well, what about buying it? I just want something turnkey. You know?
Yeah, it sounds like that, you know, that couple hundred employee like market is pretty risky because you're a big enough target, like you said, to where, you know, you're going to get hit by the Russian auditors at some point. But you're not quite big enough to where you have $1 million plus IT budget. So what's the solution?
Well, so when we're often, you know, out there, you know, talking with companies and seeing what other vendors are proposing, and what I see is that most IT vendors are pretty smart, and they're looking to go after the major addressable markets in the marketplace. And you know, the major addressable markets are, you know, small businesses and big businesses. Mm-hmm. Big businesses are good because you know who they are and you can target them from a sales process standpoint. And small businesses are good because there's plenty of them. You can get referrals. It's easy to you know, find another small business that's new and close by. So you wouldn't think that they would have that much in common, but actually they do. Going back to that slide that I was showing you earlier in your mind and thinking about the how most organizations handle IT, you know, fully 65% or so of those either were doing it themselves or had an IT department, which is you know, also doing it yourself. So the big businesses are doing it themselves because they're going to buy ingredients. You know, they're going to buy the security tool or the project or the consulting hour, and they're going to then project manage that and do it themselves. Or the small businesses, the owner is going to buy the computer or buy the Office 365, and they're going to set that system up themselves. So most IT vendors are really set up to just, I would say, sell ingredients, not really sell what I think people are really looking for, which is a turnkey solution where somebody is actually responsible.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this in the types of plans that are out there. So I'm just thinking about a 40-user organization, and if I was going in and selling that versus the other things that I usually see in place, is I go in and I'm saying, well, we're going to provide strategy to meet your business goals. We're going to provide compliance. Be able to give you a budget. Work to impact your hiring needs. Help you with automation. All those types of good things. We're going to be $6,000 a month, and usually what I find is the client says, well, I've got this $1,000 a month retainer, and I say, well, how did you arrive at $1,000 a month? And they just said, well, that was sort of our budget at the time 5 years ago when we started working with them, and I don't really know how we arrived there, but so it's usually kind of an arbitrary amount, maybe an hourly rate of somewhere around $125 an hour. And I guess I know you've worked on retainer before, Blake, and when you do that kind of work, how does that work? Kind of get started.
Let me see if I know what you're asking here, but yeah, it's kind of like how long do I think it's going to take, versus how much trouble it's going to be for me to keep doing this kind of work. That's kind of a time estimate, plus along with what the client's budget is. It's like, well, here's how much work I can do in the budget you have for that project, that kind of thing.
So it's nice to have a little bit of a budget there. That's good. I mean, do you feel like fully empowered to solve whatever the issue is there, or are you kind of at the beck and call of, people ultimately want to know, like if you bill an extra 2 hours on something that wasn't approved, I know when we were running retainers, we'd get some scrutiny on those things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's kind of like you're watching the clock, right? And it's like, well, I'm only going to take this much time because this is all the time the client's going to pay me for, basically. And
right.
if you have to overrun that, it's like, ooh, you better have a good reason.
So you've got an arbitrary amount of money usually set. You've got just the hourly fees that are representative of the, what the market value is of that skill level. And what we saw is that, oftentimes networks are unreliable. You never really got to some of the root causes of security problems. Usually there wasn't enough account management to really, have a real plan in place that was beyond just sort of fixing the issues that come up. But oftentimes you just keep on reapplying the fix. So usually people get kind of sick of that, and we also see some sort of a monitoring plan, or the monitoring plans are the cheapest. The cloud plans are very similar. They're often much more expensive, but they're both the same kind of thing, where somebody is going to take over. The monitoring plans will monitor the computers you own, and they'll let you know when they fail. The cloud plans, the cloud provider maintains the computers so they don't fail. But in either sense, you're kind of buying into a platform, and the things like if you're buying from a cloud provider, they're not going to provision the users into the system. They're not going to configure the system necessarily to meet the business needs. They're going to keep the lights on and shoot it down the wire to you. If you're monitoring equipment you own, the vendor's going to see when it's breaking down. But in either situation, whether you're with a cloud vendor or you're monitoring equipment that you own, neither of those vendors is going to come to you usually and say, well, you know what, you're in the wrong equipment. There's not really that strategy there. There's not really anyone saying, setting up the users correctly in it. So we do see a lot of commonalities between these two plans. The monitoring plans are the cheapest. Usually you're spending, for 40 users, it might be something like $2,000 a month. It might be, $15, $20 per workstation for the monitoring, and then, additional hourly rates on top of that when something goes wrong. Cloud plans can be fairly expensive. They could be, really up there around the $5,000, $6,000 a month mark. But then there's often no compliance. There's no there's maybe compliance with a small c, like, hey, we've got we lock the door in our data center at night, but usually not compliance with a large c, like we're making sure the right users are set up in your system.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's kind of the difference between proactive service and just kind of like really the same issues you have when you have just a handful of IT people or one IT guy, where it's like, oh, I'll take care of that when I have time. I'll take care of that when I have more hours next month. But the next month comes and something else takes your hours. It's like, where do you fit in time for strategy and for for proactive service?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of the real cost of no IT strategy. Here's a 18-user nonprofit, and they had somebody that was providing IT support, and they were coming out on site. They were doing it for $13.75 or $65 a month, line shift. They're a national company. This is not some fly-by-night organization. Regarded as one of the better ones in the business. Mm-hmm. They've got a campus, so they've got multiple buildings. This is the Virginia Horse Center, actually. Mm. And they had a variety of different phone and internet services to make everything work across their campus. Then they had some cloud software. They weren't fully taking advantage of Office 365 that was being provided to them through Mindshift, and they were pretty frustrated with Mindshift for a while. But usually, what would happen is that we'd start to engage in a conversation, and they'd say, "Well, how much are your services?" And we'd give them a ballpark, and then they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we can't afford that." And then we call them back, 4 months or 6 months later, and eventually we realized that they actually had a fairly substantial IT budget. And this one's unique because of the phone system, but it's not uncommon to find something kind of like this. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's maybe an employee that's doing something that is, like you said, not their job role. Here it was a technology fix, so it's pretty easy to put down on the board here. But after working with them for a couple of months, we were able to take the $4,100 a month that they were spending and drop that down to $34, while giving them a fully responsible IT department where they were getting strategy. They had somebody to talk to that was local, all of that type of good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty significant difference for, I mean, just for the phone system. But even, we see savings in the internet service and, lots of other places where, yeah, just having a strategy, having somebody being proactive and looking out for you saves you, in this case, money on paper, but in a lot of cases, just time and effort and wasted resources as well.
Yeah. So here they were spending $4,100 a month, and they were, using old systems really across the board. They were using old email that didn't have access to OneDrive or encryption. They were using old phone systems that didn't have as many automated attendants and that kind of stuff, and they were spending more. This is one of the local competitors we have, and right on their website it says no salespeople or account executive. So I mean, the question I have with that is, one is we saw how the costs reduce as you scale an IT department, and then you get better quality, happier IT employees because you're able to specialize. So if I'm the customer buying from a company that's bragging that they have no account executives, what's that company's strategy to really scale? They say their strategy is the services are so good they sell themselves, and that kind of leads me to the next question, which is, are they selling themselves on the help desk call or on the emergency, field dispatch, or when you're responding to the fire alarm that goes off when I get locked out of my system? Where is the strategy coming through? What is going to lead me to not being, this example here where, you can't really manage change like that through just the help desk, just through, technical people alone trying to fix something.
Yeah, that's. I mean, account executives and salespeople get, kind of a bad rap, but it's part of it is setting strategy and making sure you're spending money in the right places, not just to, separate you from your money. It's to make sure you're making the right choices with how you spend that money.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I know we picked on some internal IT teams like Fazio and Monticello that kind of got owned by the external auditors. But it happens with managed services companies, often because they are just selling an ingredient that doesn't have any sort of strategy behind it. Here's a Wisconsin managed backup company that made the news. And they were selling in dental offices, and they had hundreds of their clients. They were ransomed because they were just focused on doing that narrow vertical of backup. When you're just so narrowly focused on backup, you're really missing that big picture strategy for really your process as well as your clients. So here they were doing a great job with backup, but because backup doesn't include security, everybody got encrypted. So that's why when we're working with folks, we are bundling services together so that people aren't, just getting one thing. We really want to work together as a team, just like a fully staffed IT department. We want to make sure that people are buying that bundle, so they're not just getting an ingredient in one area like backup and nothing else. So one thing though so I guess our ideal partnership with a client would be us providing all of the us just helping a client with the things that the things that are sort of non-strategic IT, things like help desk, things like security, infrastructure. These are things that pretty much are the same no matter where you're at. And we want to work with IT departments and with IT staff. If obviously there's a lot of different blocks here on the table. If you feel like, hey, I've got a great help desk team internally, they already know our users, I'm really happy with them. That's wonderful. We don't want to take away those relationships. We want to just augment and help that team, be more successful by providing the risk and compliance and the infrastructure engineering. But what partnering with somebody like Ian Computers would really open up for somebody who is on the help desk team, it would open up opportunities for them to focus more on user training, and to maybe work towards that CIO role for the organization, where instead of being so focused on the systems, you're more focused on the data that's getting processed through the systems. And that kind of pulls me back to an earlier slide, which is Ian Computers was founded in October of 1997, which actually makes us an older company than Google. Now, obviously, Google set out to do something different than what Ian Computers set out to do. Ian Computers really set out to keep computers running for the sake of keeping computers running and helping users for the sake of helping users, where Google set out to organize the world's information and make it accessible. Now, there is an infrastructure component to that, but they were doing more than just an infrastructure play, where really my entire life has been, doing that IT infrastructure play. So if you've got some bright IT people on your team at your company, let them be that CIO role and grow into that role. Let them be, revolutionize your business like, Google has revolutionized the way we look for information, and let them think about driving automation in the business instead of making sure the lights are just kept on in the server room.
Right.
Partner with somebody like an Ian Computers to do those types of non-strategic things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then especially, employees where I think you've seen many cases where like the CFO, the controller, the office manager, those kinds of people end up in the IT role, keeping the lights on.
Yes.
And, struggling to do that. And so they can get back to, really helping the business drive revenue and helping the business to grow and focus on their business, so they don't have to worry about the IT side of it as well.
Yes. Yeah, and oftentimes, even if they're not, I've seen them where they're directly having to set up computers, and, I think that when the CFO is setting up computers on the desk, that's one level of engagement in IT that's maybe a missed opportunity to do something more strategic. More commonly, I see the CFO having to project manage the IT company, because really the IT company is, the IT decisions where there's no account executives. The IT company doesn't really have that management layer there to provide the project management. So then the CFO is the account executive, right, having to figure it out.
Yeah, it's like when you're you're building a house or you're remodeling your house, you hire a GC, you hire a general contractor to oversee everything. So you're not having to run around asking the guy when he's going to install these light switches. And when the drywall guy,
exactly.
You hire somebody to do that for you, like we do. Everyone knows that, but it seems like in the IT world that gets missed a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, there's no building inspector. Yeah.
Anybody can install those light switches.
That's right. So join the team here at Ian Computers. 50 or so area businesses have already done it, and scale your business with us, and that's it.
Right. Well, thanks, Ian.
We can ring the bell, clap. The crowd goes wild.
Oh, where's the, oh, here it is, the hand clap emoji.
There we go.
Well,
Well,
thanks, Ian,
thank you.
for sharing these insights with us.
You're welcome. I'll take off the hat. We can. It's like after the Super Bowl, throw it in the air.
Awesome. So